Everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different, and honestly, a lot spookier. We're dissecting two absolutely terrifying internet folklore stories to figure out exactly what makes them so undeniably effective. We've sourced these from some really popular animated storytelling channels, and we're going to break down the actual structure of these tales. By analyzing the source material, we'll uncover the exact psychological triggers they use to, well, crawl right under your skin.
So, let me ask you this. What is more terrifying, the monster waiting in the dark woods or the monster sitting right next to you? It's a pretty chilling thought, isn't it? And really, this question is the beating heart of our analysis today. We're going to look at how these two very distinct stories manipulate our baseline sense of safety and vulnerability in completely different, yet equally devastating ways.
But before we break down that first source, I want you to take just a second and truly imagine this premise. You are completely stranded in the dark. You're totally isolated from the safe, predictable, well-lit world you're used to. Out there, every snapping twig feels like a direct threat, and your mind almost immediately starts playing tricks on you. That kind of deep, atmospheric dread, that is exactly where our first story drops us.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Next summer camp, I'll come again. This is the chilling final promise delivered at the very end of our first source. It's the kind of quote that transforms a simple, run-of-the-mill ghost story into a lingering, inescapable nightmare. So let's unpack the source material and see exactly how the narrative earns such a terrifying climax.
Section 1, Story 1, Haunted Camp, The Monster Among Us.
All right, so our source material introduces us to 5 college friends, Arav, Kabir, Neil, Tanya, and Ria. They're seeking a thrill, right? Looking for an adventure in this remote mountain village that comes complete with dense, silent forests and this ever-present floating mist. But, you know, every good horror story needs a solid foundation of dread. The friends run into a local village grandmother who shares a really chilling legend. 20 years ago, a summer camp in those exact woods had to be shut down permanently. Why? Because 5 students went into the woods at night, but only 4 returned by morning. The 5th boy was simply never found. And despite this incredibly clear, incredibly ominous warning, the friends, fueled by youth and adrenaline, decide to sneak out to the abandoned campsite at night anyway.
And this moment right here brilliantly illustrates the turning point of the narrative. Around 2 a.m., Arav leaves the tent just to fetch some water. By the faint light of his flashlight, he spots footprints in the wet mud. But here is the absolutely crucial point. The footprints aren't leading away from the camp. They are walking directly into their campsite from the dark woods. It's a masterful moment of suspense. Something didn't just walk past them in the dark. Something actively joined them.
Which brings us to Section 2, Anatomy of a Betrayal, the Undercover Ghost Trope.
Here is where the source material shifts gears from a standard campfire scare into something deeply psychological. It's not just about a ghost haunting a physical location anymore. It's about how this entity manipulates our most fundamental human trust. Let's look at how this deadly timeline builds. 20 years ago, a boy vanishes at the camp. Jump forward to just 3 months ago. A guy named Kabir joins this tight-knit college friend group. Present day, the 5 friends go camping in those exact cursed woods. And the morning after, Kabir vanishes without a single trace. When the frantic, surviving friends run all the way back to the village, that grandmother shows them a 20-year-old photograph of the original missing students.
And here is where the math becomes absolutely terrifying. 5. The friends look closely at the dusty old photograph and see Kabir staring right back at them. The horrifying realization hits them like a freight train. They thought they were 4 surviving friends on a trip with 1 lost. But with the ghost infiltrating their lives months in advance, the number of actual, living humans in that tent was always 4. The 5th entity was the nightmare itself.
So this brings us to a really terrifying concept, the deceiver. By definition, this is a supernatural entity that mimics human behavior to infiltrate a group, build trust, and then hunt from within. Our source actually ends this story with a massive gut punch shock. Arav receives a text message with a photo showing Kabir standing behind them in the dark, but his eyes are completely pitch black. Right after reading this, their friend Neil smiles this mysterious, sinister smile, and his face literally slowly transforms into Kabir's. The deceiver hasn't left them, it just seamlessly changed its mask.
Section 3, Story 2, Stormy Shelter, A Trap in the Rain.
Okay, so if the first story weaponized the fear of who you're with, this story weaponizes the fear of where you are. We follow a man named Raghu, a cyclist, trying to reach a town called Kusumpur. who gets dangerously lost in a massive, blinding thunderstorm. Let's step through Raghu's nightmare. Step 1. The severe storm and fallen trees force him completely off his path. Step 2. Out of nowhere, a perfectly timed, remote tea stall appears in the dark, run by a mysterious man named Ratan. But you really need to pay attention to Step 3. As Raghu sits down, he notices a lingering, sickening smell of burning flesh and raw blood in the damp air. This sensory detail perfectly sets up Step 4, the horrifying morning revelation, which completely seals the trap.
Because the simmering tension suddenly breaks, Ratan's wife, Jumar, comes out to offer Raghu some pan. Suddenly, a violent gust of wind blows her head covering back, revealing a deeply cut throat and a stream of fresh blood. She quickly covers it up and just vanishes into the shadows. Raghu is frozen in absolute terror, suddenly realizing he is trapped in the storm with something distinctly unnatural.
Moving on to Section 4, the vengeful loop, the cursed loop trope. Now, unlike the shape-shifting deception of the first story, the horror here is entirely dictated by the grisly history of the specific location Raghu has stumbled into. The environment itself is the monster. To understand the mechanics of this loop, we have to look at Ratan's confession. Later that deep stormy night, Ratan tells Raghu a truly brutal story. 3 years ago, he caught his beautiful wife cheating on him with a man named Shankar. In a blind rage, Ratan slashed his wife's throat. He then dragged Shankar and hanged him from the bamboo ceiling. Finally, surrounded by his horrific deeds, Ratan threw a burning lantern onto his dead wife, burning the tea stall down with himself inside. He wasn't just telling Raghu a scary story. He was explicitly confessing to the exact spectral playback Raghu was currently trapped inside. When we compare the mechanics of these two stories, a fascinating contrast emerges. On the left side, we have the deceiver, blending in with the living, actively hunting new victims, and fundamentally violating personal trust. But on the right, we have the tragic echo, perpetually trapped in an isolated location, endlessly replaying its own grisly death, and manipulating the physical surroundings to trap unfortunate wanderers like Raghu. Both are completely terrifying, but they attack our psyche in completely different ways.
And the climax of Raghu's story brings us to this stark quote. There was no stall, just the burnt skeleton of a hut. The next morning, Raghu rushes away from the cursed area, only to realize he left his money bag behind. He reluctantly rides back, but the tea stall is entirely gone. In its place are only ancient, burnt ruins. Suddenly, the wind blows. That sickening smell of rotting blood returns, and the terrifying, bloodied ghost of Jumar appears out of thin air to hand him his bag. The shock is so profound, Raghu simply faints right on the spot.
Which brings us to Section 5, Nowhere is Safe, the final conclusion.
Here is the ultimate, inescapable takeaway from our analysis today. You cannot trust your friends, and you cannot trust your surroundings. By looking at these two sources, we've synthesized the core fears they so effectively weaponize against the audience. The first source proves that the familiar can be deeply unnatural and deceptive, while the second source proves that the unknown can violently trap you in its own endless nightmare.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. So the next time you find yourself deep in the dark woods with your closest companions, or desperately seeking shelter from a blinding rainstorm in a completely unknown place, who are you really sitting next to? Thank you so much for joining me as we unpacked these incredible sources today. Keep your eyes peeled and always stay curious.